Okay, hello everyone. Uh, so we are live right now. Welcome everyone to UX Week's webinar today. My name is Marek. I'll be your host for today, and we will be discussing why surveys may be dangerous or are dangerous with our esteemed guest Zsuzsa Kovacs, who will be joining us just in a few moments. Before we start, the plan for today is first I'll provide a little intro about UX Week for those who do not know us. Then Zsuzsa will take over with a presentation about why surveys are dangerous, and in the end we'll wrap up with a live Q&A session. So please, throughout the whole stream, feel free to ask the questions to the chat. I will then gather them and Zsuzsa will answer them at the end of the stream. So, UX Week, it's a all-around UX research platform which provides you with a set of tools which you can use for throughout your whole UX research process, from the very beginning when you are organizing the content with cards or tree tests, through learning more about your users with preference tests, surveys, all the way to testing your created prototypes, as well as the full product with mobile or website testing. Any survey or any study is only as good as the participants that you manage to recruit for it. That's why we also provide you with help in that manner with our user panel. With our user panel, we'll always guarantee the quality of the participants. You can recruit for any study that you run in UX Week. We have a worldwide coverage with the participants, and we take pride in providing fair incentives for the efforts that the participants give in their studies. But that's enough about UX Week. Now Zsuzsa will join us, and we'll slowly start the discussion about surveys. Okay, so hi Zsuzsa, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a pleasure having you today with us. For those who do not know Zsuzsa is a senior UX researcher with experience from big companies. Currently, you are a freelancer. So what was the motivation behind this change?
So the motivation was pretty blunt. I was laid off, as many experts and many UXers in the last 2 years. And since I have a still pretty small son, I decided that I don't want to go and join a company. I cannot really work 8 hours a day still. So I thought that I would try out myself as a freelancer. And I have to say I really enjoy it, because this way I have a chance to work with different companies and research different topics, which is always exciting because I'm a curious person, so I get to learn about many different domains.
Mm-hmm. And was this curiosity also a motivation behind getting into UX in general?
Yes, I think it was one of the jobs where you work together with people, you talk to people, and then it slowly led me to specialize in UX research long ago. And I have to say this is really the area of product development that I enjoy the most.
Great, and you are also known for organizing meetups in Budapest, the UX meetups, as well as the MU's conference. How did you get into that, basically?
I worked for SAP in the beginning of my career, and I also worked in the German office. So pretty early on, compared to the Hungarian market, I learned about UX, and I always really liked teaching and sharing knowledge. And so when I came back to Budapest, I joined the UX Budapest meetup organizing team. So for many years, we organized meetups in Budapest and several events. And then when we started to do a Muse, I stepped back from, so now I'm not in the organizational team of the UX Budapest meetup group, which is still a huge one. They have about 7,000 people in the group. Not so many people joining all of the events, but it's a huge group. And Muse is, so let's say it was a next level challenge to organize a conference that is international with international speakers. So yeah, I like trying new things, and that was another thing to look into how such an event is organized.
So I think that I will be speaking for everyone who is present here, that we are more than looking forward to learning from you as from your many years of experience. So the floor is yours, and please, you can start.
Thank you. So I just need a little preparation. So I need to start my presentation because today I decided to try a new format. And instead of bringing you a usual presentation, I thought, how about I try something that is called Prezi Video. I also spent almost 10 years at a company called Prezi. And this was one of the products that this company built. And so yeah, I decided to use this one today to present to you. I'm not sure if in the big page I still see your slide. I don't know if that's okay, and if should I continue or...
No, on the stream you are currently.
Okay, good. So then I can start. So hello everyone. And after this short intro, let's dig deeper into the topic, why we came today. So I gave this presentation a title that I thought was really something that would bring here people, especially those people who use surveys a lot. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about why surveys are actually dangerous. I would say the most dangerous research tool that we have and that we use, and why you should do less surveys. So I'm not going to convince you to do more. I would be happy if after today, each of you would think twice or three times before saying, oh, let's do a survey to learn about this or that. So the topics I'm going to go through are, first I want to talk a little bit in general about surveys and see into why those are dangerous, but then also look through the cases when I think using surveys are still okay if you do them right. Then I would like to give you some do's and don'ts, which would help you to make better surveys if you must do some. And at the end, I brought you some links to further readings, and we will have a question and answer part. And yes, you already heard, please send me questions. I love questions. And if you are curious people like I am, then please ask yours as well. So let's start. Let's start with what are surveys? So you all know what a survey looks like, right? It's not something like a diary study or some specific usability testing that you need to learn about. And that's one of the dangers. Everybody knows how a survey looks like. Here's an example actually of a really bad survey question. So this is how a survey looks like, right? There is a question and there are answer options. And everybody's doing that. And everybody thinks they can do that. But before we dig deeper into surveys, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is good research look like. So what I believe good research is. So research is all about exploring the problem space, right? So in the beginning, you think there is this little area that you would like to learn more about, and you don't know anything about, or you have very little knowledge about this space. So research is about asking the right questions. And if you do research right, then your questions would even go a little bit out of this problem space, like, going a little bit discovering areas around. As you talk to people and they answer your questions, you suddenly start to realize that your problem space is actually not even that small, but it's a much bigger space. And you will have much more knowledge about this space, and of course, even more questions. That's the nature of research, that you can never actually finish it. You can just stop doing it. But good research is always opening up the problem space. First of all, answering your questions. Very important that good research is approving or disapproving your hypotheses. So, you have some preconceptions. it's always a good start to list them so you know your preconceptions, and this is one way to overcome your biases and to do research right. And so good research will say to some of your hypotheses, yes, these were right, your preconceptions were right here. And then it will say, no, but these other hypotheses you had were wrong. So this is how good research works. Now let's see why I say surveys are dangerous. I have actually a long list of issues with surveys, and let's dig into this. So first of all, surveys are leading by default. Good research is not leading. Good research is open questions. It lets people tell you stories. It lets people, tell you their opinions, and that is what is actually opening up this space. But surveys, in this case, you not only define the questions, so you're not only asking questions, but you also provide with the answers, right? So this is the definition of a survey. And unfortunately, what it will do is you have a hypothesis, you probe it with a question, and the only thing that can turn out is that it's true or false. But it will never open up this space. It's a leading type of research because you lead the answer options and you never let yourself really be surprised by, actually, this answer never came into my mind because you listed all the possible answers, right? So by definition, it's a really leading type of research, and it will never open up the problem space. You will never be surprised by asking a really good question, meeting a really, really talkative, good user, a good participant who would tell you, things you never even thought are connecting to this problem space in the first place. So this is problem number one. Also, why I made this green, because surveys by definition also will more tend to approve your hypothesis, and less likely you will learn that your hypotheses were false in the beginning, and that's because of this leading nature. Erica Hall, who I really love, she's a super experienced UX researcher and UX expert in the US. She actually advocates for not using surveys, and she advocates a lot about the dangers of surveys. And I learned this phrase from her, attractive nuisance. This phrase actually comes from law, and they call attractive nuisance something, a hazardous object that is likely to attract those people who are unable to realize the risk of this object. For example, for attractive nuisance is, for example, a pool. So if you have a pool for kids, unattended kids, right? Because a kid without an adult would feel that a pool that is, if it's in front of them, it's super lacking. They would go and they would jump into it, and it's actually a huge risk for them. So that's the same with surveys. Why does she call it an attractive nuisance? Because it's really easy to set up, and everybody on this planet would think they can set up a survey, right? I don't think you ever met someone who said, oh no, surveys are super hard, I will never dare to do one. Only those people say this who actually have some experience and understand the dangers. So it's too easy to set up, and it's too easy to make it bad. And if you build a bad survey, then you will feel like you did research, but in fact, you will actually only approve your preconceptions, and you will not learn anything new about the problem space, right? So that's why it's super dangerous, and that's why I am more for not doing surveys. So especially if you are new to it, don't dare. You are less likely to make big mistakes in an interview, and you will learn much more. I believe that you can learn more from one interview than from 100 survey responses. So let's continue. Fill out rates, right? If you do a survey, of course, since it's kind of a quantitative method, so you will get, you do that, so you can attach some numbers to your findings. And so, of course, you would like to go for the highest fill out rate. But again, if you want to build a good survey, people will not fill it out. Why do I say that? First of all, people are really burned out of surveys. 10 years ago, it was a totally different world. I was actually a survey, crazy person. I always signed up for these research institutes, and I loved getting, or these, market research companies, and I loved getting surveys. I was filling them out all the time. That's why I learned so much about bad surveys. But after a while, I actually got tired. Got tired because 10 years ago, nobody was asking you to give your opinion. Now you cannot even buy I don't know, a small shelf in IKEA without them asking you to rate it, to rate your experience, to tell them, what they could do better. So, of course, this is a sign of better services around us and better tools around us, but it also makes us burnt out of surveys because we are asked to fill in surveys so often. Also, when you build a survey, a good survey would consist of a lot of open-ended questions, but people will not, they don't like to type a lot. So that's why I also believe more in interviews. People are much more likely to tell you about their experiences long. They will tell you long stories. They love to talk, most of them, but nobody loves to type a lot. So even if you find someone who will fill out your survey, they will give you the shortest possible answer that they can type, and still they kind of cover what they had in mind, but they will not type a lot. And it's also because now more and more users, when you send out a survey via email, they are reading emails on their mobile phones, and they are not going to type a lot. So mobile phones are not really built for that. Also, when you build a survey and you think that people will come and they will, think a lot about the best possible answer, you are wrong. People actually want to finish your survey as fast as they can. They're not going to allocate time and have a calm space and a peace of mind to really think through your questions. No, they are going to just find the first answer that actually fits somehow what they think, and then they will go to the next one. So they want to just rush through it. So yeah, always keep in mind that instead of the best, they will just pick the fastest answer because they want to get to the end. So fill out rates. Why did I talk about fill out rates? Because you always go for the most fill outs. And I went to SurveyMonkey, and SurveyMonkey actually recommends you. I will try to zoom in. They recommend you not to write open-ended questions because those are the ones that are filled out by the least people. I don't know from where these percentages come from. I would actually love if any of my surveys would be filled out by 89% of people. But we believe they have statistics. They have a lot of surveys. So they say, the simple multiple choice questions would be filled out the most. Then the second is these matrix rating scale, clicking, tapping on your mobile phone, not typing. Then the third would be some introductory text, I guess some really small typing, and open-ended questions would be the least. So, their users' completion will actually decrease. Also, look here, if you put them a matrix rating scale, which is oftentimes actually pretty complicated, so it's not something really easy to fill in, 81% of people would complete that, and then open-ended questions, only 78%. And then the last graph, also it goes against building a good survey. The more questions you ask, the fill-in rate or the completion percentage goes down. So what does these statistics mean? A good survey would be, in my opinion, something that consists like many questions, right? Because you want to learn about the problem space and you want to understand many things. And it would have a lot of open-ended questions because that would guarantee you are not, pushing your answer options through, and you really can get whatever is in people's mind, considering they are willing to type a lot, which they want. So this means that a good survey will not be filled in by many people. And when you do a survey, you still need to consider and keep in mind that you want to get many answers. So these two things go against. Either you have a not so good survey that is filled out by many people, or you have an excellent survey and you have 3 responses. So building a good survey that is filled out by many people is almost impossible. So let's go a little bit further. What other issues are with surveys? Context loss. What do I mean by context loss? It means that when you do research, context is king, which means that our brain works in a way that if you are in the context of the thing that you are researching or the researchers researching, your brain would bring up more relevant memories. So if you want to understand how people feel about traveling, you need to go to a place where they are they are doing the traveling. It can be a plane, not on the plane, but I forgot the word. So you need to go to a train station, or you need to go to an airport. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. You need to go to a place where people are in the context of this area you are researching, and then the relevant memories will come up. When they are sitting on the couch and filling out your survey or your questionnaire, actually, it's unless you are researching how it is to fill in questionnaires, it cannot be in context, right? Because they are really probably far away from something that they did. Once you brought home the IKEA shelf, you are not in IKEA, you're not picking out the shelves, you are not, seeing all the other shelves. It's actually like, unless you're building it and you get the survey to answer if it was easy to build or not, but they cannot, time it this perfectly. Probably you are after that it happened, and you won't have all your brain works in a way that you forget a lot of things. So you will never, or it's really hard to be in context. Also, a big pain point if you're a researcher, there's no chance to clarify things, and there's no empathy present. So if respondents don't understand your question or some of the options that you provided, they cannot ask back to clarify. And also, you see a super interesting rating or a very short but very interesting feedback or insight, and there's no way you check back, you ask back, you cannot ask clarification questions, you cannot dig deeper. So you ask something, they answer something, and that's it. There it stops. Actually, one way to overcome this is, if you wanna, that's something that actually I always recommend to do in surveys, and I now just realized I forgot to put it into the do's and don'ts, is to ask for the email address of respondents. So you can go back to them, if they have some super interesting things that the way they filled it in is really unusual, or you have questions, you can always go back and ask them deeper if they allow you to do so. So this is always an optional thing. You can ask them if they allow you to, go for them and ask for further feedback. Okay, but let's continue. Also, a really huge issue with surveys is that, we do research not only to learn about the problem space, but we also do that to empathize with people, to feel empathy towards our users, and to share this empathy with other people who participate in product development. There's no way to feel empathy to a line in a spreadsheet. So that's never, a person, someone you talk to, someone you remember. If you talk to people who haven't participated in many research sessions, they will remember them, all of the sessions they went to. They remember the people, the faces, the feelings shared. This never happens with surveys. So it will never be the same as doing a few interviews. Also, respondents, who are the ones who are going to fill in your survey once you did one. Well, without incentives, so if you don't incentivize responding, only fans and haters fill it out. What do I mean? It means that, if this is let's say your user base, then you will have those with the strongest feelings, those who really hate what you do, or those who really love what you do. The problem with this is that fans, sure, it's really good to hear how they love your product, your service, your whatever, but you won't learn anything from that. Haters, on the other hand, it might be useful to talk to them, but also they are too angry, and they won't be able to, rationally see the good and the bad. They will only focus on the bad because they are really, really pissed because of something bad happened to them. So, what would actually really help you is the people in the middle, those who are not hating you and not loving you, but they are undecisive, or they find, they can really judge, these are the good points, these are the bad points. So the two endpoints are extremes, and those are not the best folks to talk to. I also brought here a little statistic. I just checked yesterday, who are the ones leaving Google reviews on Google about restaurants, and you can see the fans and the haters. So if a restaurant has this is a particularly good restaurant. It has, mainly those are leaving feedback who really loved it, who had a really good experience. And then if there's a not so good restaurant, then those will be, the most. So the most people will leave really bad reviews. Those who had, hair in their food. But the 4 and the 2, the in between, That's not really the people who would go and leave a review, and that's the same with surveys. So they are not the ones who are going to fill in your survey, unfortunately. Now, if you introduce incentives, because I said without incentives, this is what happens. If you introduce incentives, it can also bias. Like if you are going to, usually surveys are not incentivized in a way or incentivized that you pay money per each fill out. Usually, you do raffles and you say, 3 of the respondents will win an iPad. Now, this is already biasing those who are going to participate. Even money can bias because then you actually introduce a motivation which is to get money. So those people will be more likely to fill it in who need money more, and maybe they are not the ones who can judge your service or who the best. I mean, you also need their opinion, but you would need an opinion of almost everybody, and that's usually not happening. And then if you did everything right and you wrote the perfect questions and you reach your audience and everything is looking good, you can still bias the analysis. And unfortunately, it happens very often. First of all, data cleaning would be super important. In huge statistical studies, they always start with data cleaning. That's not so commonly done with surveys, although you would need one. So what does data cleaning mean? You should go through the answers and try to fill out everybody who were just, the click, the first answer, for example. Or they usually, you can find these people if they answer things that are contradicting to each other. For example, they said they really hate your service, and then they, in another rating, they give it, the maximum star. It was just something made up, but usually in every survey there are questions that you can say, or you can find out questions where the answers can contradict, and you should clean those out. Or everybody who to every open-ended question writes XXX. Those might be not respondents who didn't really spend the time to give you good feedback. So data cleaning is usually not happening. So again, that will already bias your sample. And also, since you lack context, you lack the person, you couldn't ask clarification questions, you will be more likely to understand and interpret things in a way you want them to be, in a way that will really approve your hypothesis and not go against. So because you have less context and less real people behind, there's this famous quote from Churchill. Usually every statistic is somehow biased. So this is also one way how it can go wrong. But even if you did a really good analysis, still the presentation can be misleading or can be biasing. Very common problem or mistake that I hear and find is people, when they present about the results of a survey, they usually talk about people and users instead of respondents. From a survey, you will never know about everybody, right? And still, if you present that, this is how it will be heard by, for example, stakeholders. Also, very common mistake to use percentages versus exact numbers. Percentages, again, they are closer to talking about 30% of users. No, 30% of the people who fill in your survey, and 30% might be 12 people. So always put there the exact numbers. You can also show the percentages if that's something. Sometimes you must use percentages to compare different things, but always somehow put there the numbers, what those exact numbers were. So you get a better feel of if it's significant or not significant. So I don't even go into statistics that biggest problem of a survey, if you have 20 responses, that's not really significant, and that you cannot really think about as quantitative data. But and then one of my favorite topics, also charts. This is often done by politicians and newspapers, that they take some data and they interpret it in a really, really misleading way because they want to get some message through. And if it was, shown right, it wouldn't be such a dramatic thing. But they always go for drama. And we also oftentimes go for drama because we want to convince stakeholders about something we really believe in. So these are dangers of surveys, really shortly. But let's go on. Let's see, what there is still to know about surveys. What kind of surveys we have, because I don't think all of the surveys are actually bad. Research surveys, yeah, that's not my favorite type because of the reasons I just told you. Customer satisfaction surveys, or NPS, that's the worst type of survey. If you ask me, I don't really like them, and I think they are not really good at most of them. Especially NPS is not really good in learning about what users or customers think about your service. Screener surveys, on the other hand, are very, very handy, and that's something you cannot really come across. It can still cheat you. What screener surveys are? Screener surveys are short questionnaires that you put together when you are recruiting participants to your research, and you want to have a first idea, like a rough feeling of if they are the type of people you want to talk to or not the type of people you want to talk to, and so you fill in a survey. Or let them fill in a survey, and from those answers you will know, like if they are working at the company that is the size you are actually researching, or they have they're using the right tools you want to ask them about. So screener surveys are actually very, very useful, and since you are going to talk to these people later, even if they actually like lied in the screening survey, which they actually do quite often, or not so often, but it happens because they want to get the voucher you are offering them for the research. So they would, lie something about, something they can. So they would say in a survey they know about certain things or they have certain experience when in fact they don't. But if you talk to them later in an interview, it will, you will learn about that. So they will not be able to bias your research. And what I also really love are contextual micro surveys. So one question or maximum 2 question surveys that you can ask in a context of, for example, a digital solution. I will bring you like examples later. So these kind of surveys we are going to touch, or I'm going to talk about today. But in general, what I mean is research surveys that are super dangerous. Okay, so let's see when to use surveys at all. Because another problem with surveys is that they are often misused and used also in contexts and in situations when they should never used. So yeah, I think you should not use surveys so often. Actually, but let's see, what are the recommended, or when if you must, when you should do that. So first of all, if you already did interviews, you did some kind of research, and you are through the discovery with interviews or deep interviews or contextual interviews. I think good discovery research is done by interviews. Contextual interviews are the best. So if you can go and ask people in the domain, in the context where this certain problem is occurring, that's the best. And once you did interviews, and you want to validate your findings on a bigger sample, which is actually not needed. So I don't say that, if you did 10 interviews, you have to validate that, otherwise it's not valid. It's totally valid. So when stakeholders or customers or clients I work with, they express that, they feel that 10 interviews are something that is really hard to trust, that it's not trustworthy. I usually tell them, if they think that I have this special superpower, that I found those 10 people on this planet who think about this domain totally differently as anybody else. If not, then those people are probably their opinion, their ideas, their stories are also valid for many other people. So they are representing actually a group of users. So you don't need to validate qualitative research. But if you want to, double check, or if you want to see if you left out something, or if these are really some kind of findings that are true for a bigger group, it is. If you want to see that, or you want to prove it to someone, you can use a survey to do that. Or if you want to quantify certain insights, that's, I think, one of the good type of usage of surveys. So you did some qualitative research, and you want to understand that, you already realize that there are some kind of patterns, some kind of groups, user groups or persona types, and you want to understand, like how big those certain groups are. Then surveys are an excellent tool. I wanted to share with you a case study. I really love this case study. This is from Mozilla from the early 2010s. So like they did it in 10, 11, 12, something like that. And this was a research they did to discover user types in North America. And in this case study, you will see they use surveys, but before they did 24 in-home interviews, which meant that they visited users along in many different cities in North America. They went to users and they talked to them or followed them throughout the day for several hours, and they did deep interviews. This is how they started. Then they did a diary study with 45 participants. And after doing all of this discovery research, then they did a survey to quantify insights. So this is a good usage of survey, but you see it was, first of all, not the only research method and not the first research method, right? So it was at the end to somehow quantify what they discovered. So this is a good usage of survey. Then, when you need attitudinal information, this is a very useful matrix. You can find it on the Nielsen Norman Group's website. This is a landscape of user research methods. It has all of the methods that we usually use and some that I have not even used, like eye tracking. I think this is not really common in the industry. And surveys you can find here. You can see that it's really far from all the other methods, and there's a reason for that. First of all, you see that in the axis it says qualitative and quantitative. This is rather quantitative, but it's also not, it's not still not data analysis. It's but it of course will give you, answers in with numbers. So you can say, 200 people said that, 300 people said that. So you could get numbers. So it's a quantitative method. And there is the other axis, which puts these methods along behavioral or attitudinal information that you would like to get out from research, and it's at the extreme end of attitudinal. And I think this is one of the most common mistakes that researchers or people out there do, is that they would like to understand behavioral information through a survey, and that's never a good idea. So if you would like to understand what people think about stuff, right, and not what they do or don't do, then you might think about the survey. This is super important. Okay, also surveys can be good when you can make them contextual. How you can make them contextual? Here's an example. This is just a fake thing. I think one of these services actually advertise themselves with this mock-up kind of thing. If you, there are several tools, so this is just one, but Hotjar is also doing these kind of contextual micro surveys. Is when you have a digital solution, a digital application, and after a certain action, you want to understand, what users thought about it, if they thought it was easy or difficult, or if they were satisfied or dissatisfied with an experience or with a huge flow, long flow. Then when they finished this certain action, you can ask them like this kind of a one question thing. This is also a survey, right? Because you ask a question and you provide with answers, and they can answer really fast. It's not an interview. You don't need to talk to them. And here it really makes sense to get several answers, so to understand the trends. And this is in context, right? It's not days after it happened. It's right after it happened. So, the memories are fresh. They are still in the context. There's no other way to get this kind of information. Other example is, Cooler is also doing these kind of things. So, you can ask, how can we make our product better? This is more tricky when to ask that, right? Because you cannot ask that just before they finish their work and they're about to leave, although that would be the best time. But, you can come up with a good time. You can also iterate on it, try. It definitely should show up after spending a few minutes or, in your application. From your data, you will know what is the average, time that someone who comes to your application spends there. So, you can try it, show it after 5 minutes, and then you can iterate on it to find the best time to show it. This is, as you can see, an open-ended question, so they can type in whatever. Be prepared for getting some really crazy answers as well, like students or kids or, bored people or whoever will just type in some crap text there. You can clear it out, but you can get some super interesting and very useful information here as well if you ask it at the right time. And one of the most useful things is, although most of the time it's not super useful, unfortunately, but there's, again, no other way to get those people who are about to leave your product because or for example, when you you get these kind of surveys when you unsubscribe from a mailing list you never subscribed to, or you are bored with because they send you emails every other day. So then this is usually, I think what we all know by heart is MailChimp's leaving survey. This is another type. But also when they decide to delete their account or to, to deactivate their membership, whatever. So when they decided to leave your product, that's a good place to ask why they did so. And I don't say this will be super reliable information because unfortunately, we cannot really explain. We don't even understand how we make decisions. This is also an interesting thing about the brain. We can rationalize it. So if you ask people to explain why they made certain decisions, they will tell you something, but that won't be actually totally true because the truth is, who knows? It's some unconscious things and childhood trauma and whatnot. So these are more things that would influence your decisions. But at the moment still, like if it was a money thing, if it was too expensive and they don't want to spend more money on it, they will probably tell you that, and this will be feedback you can work with or feedback you can not work with. Okay, so if you can make it contextual, so these kind of contextual microsurveys are super useful, can be very useful. And then I know there is ideal world and there is reality. Sometimes you have no other chance than either not ask any users or don't do any research or do a survey. And then of course I recommend you to do a survey because doing a good survey is always better than not asking the users in any way. Also screening for user participants. I think it's an excellent use of this research method. Okay, so let's go into some do's and don'ts. So if you must do surveys, what you should be careful about. So first of all, I think I already said that, don't do surveys as a primary discovery tool. Okay, so always do interviews first. And once you start to hear patterns, you start to hear users telling you things you already heard, that might be the good time to start to do a survey, okay? Because you at least, talk to some people and you had your preconceptions, but those users, those interview participants gave you more context and more possible answers. So once you hear those typical answers, that's something you can offer as answer options in a survey. Let's go into, some of the real details of what you should be careful about. Let's first see the problems with questions, what kind of questions you shouldn't ask. One of the common mistakes is double barrel questions. Those are questions that, because I showed you the graph, the more questions you ask, the less the less respondents, the less responses you will get. So of course, after a while, researchers or other people in IT companies start to combine questions into one, two different questions into one, and it will result in something like this. Are you satisfied with your pay and benefits? And the good thing about it is that you will not learn about any. You will not know if people are satisfied with their pay or their benefits. You will get some mixed thing, but you will still not understand, what they think about their pay and what they think about their benefits. If you want to learn about both, put them to two different questions. If you want to learn about just one, or there is a more important one, go for that, but never combine questions because you will at the end not learn anything. Don't do loaded or leading questions. These are very, very typical. This is an example from Slack I collected a few years back. It says, it asked me as a user to rate product quality. The amount of thought and care that Slack, the people building the product, put into your Slack experience, dare to say you are extremely dissatisfied after, manipulating you this much. The thought and the care, don't do that. If you want to, get honest opinion of people, then don't manipulate. Don't, try to push them, answer in a certain way. Be always very, very neutral with your questions. Also, don't do hypothetical questions. Very common. How much would you be willing to pay for this product? This is marketing people's most favorite question. It's total crap. You will not learn anything. Hypothetical questions will give you only speculations. Uh, there is Dan Ariely. I didn't put it to the readings, but I will do that after the, or I will mention him at the end if I don't forget. So Dan Ariely, is a guy who researched, who researched behavioral economics, and he has a complete book on how our brain is handling money totally badly. So we are really bad in handling money. Imagine in this scenario, you need to spend imaginary money. There's no money you wouldn't pay for something, right? So anything that people would put here is total speculation, and it has nothing to do with whether they would pay at all and whether they would pay that amount, okay? So if you want people to tell you if they would pay this amount, do a Kickstarter, and you will learn that, like, what is the money that people are willing to pay for something you want to do. But this will never tell you that. This is only speculative that they are going to answer. Then also very important that don't ask about decisions and behavior, right? We just checked. Nielsen Norman says that it's an attitude in a research method. This is also, I found it in LastPass's, one of the surveys. They were asking, at which point did you decide not to continue the process of adding sites from your email into LastPass? The fun thing was that at that point, now I'm using LastPass, but back then, I just stopped using that. And why? Because I forgot it even existed. And then, all of these answers kind of think that there was one specific moment when I was sitting in my chair or in front of my computer and I said, I'm not going to use LastPass any longer. But this is not how it happens, right? So don't ask about behavior and decisions because, again, those things won't be very trustworthy. Don't ask complicated stuff. Here, as you can see, I don't even remember which product or which survey I found it in. They asked me, there was a question before which asked me how many hours I saved on something. And now they ask me to say the percentage of hours saved in the previous question do I attribute to these activities. So they expect me to now say, I saved 3 hours and I need to fill in this table in a way that it adds up to 100 total, which is 3 hours. And I will put 23, which I don't even know how much time is, that I would spend on calendars and emails. So it's total nonsense. Don't ask me to do these kind of complicated things, because if it's a mandatory question, I'm going to close this survey and not fill it in or put in crap like 111, or I don't know, it's 100, it's 10, I will put there 10 so that I can go further, okay? Nobody is going to analyze their behavior. First of all, we are very bad in analyzing our own behavior. And if I would ever do that, I wouldn't be doing for your survey. What you should do, though, if you ask something more complicated because you really want to understand, like some deep thing, and maybe there will be some people who do it right. I don't have big trust in that, but let's assume you have a really, really cheerful and helpful crowd, your users, and they're going to do that, then please make it not required. Okay, so those who say, oh no, I'm not going to do that now, we'll still fill in your survey and leave that one empty. Okay, and then, my most favorite thing that Netflix asked me a few years ago, what is the likelihood you will continue your Netflix service over the next 3 months? So I want to ask you, what do you think it means if there is a 25% chance I will continue my Netflix service in the next 3 months? Is it that I will cancel it in 3 weeks? No, nobody is thinking about this kind of stuff in such complicated way, okay? I either now want to cancel my Netflix or I don't. But I cannot tell you in percentage likelihoods, what am I going to do in 3 months? Come on, I don't even know what I'm going to do in a week. Okay, so never go this, never expect people to answer these crazy questions because they cannot, like physically. What you should do though is do simple, open questions. Okay, how do you commute to work? There's no leading, there is no, it's a simple question and you can answer that. Still, maybe I would also say, because this is you can only add one answer, I would improve it to allow people to go with several, because maybe you use the train and the bus, or maybe some days you walk and some days you use a bicycle. So, there's still something to improve, but it's already the options. The question is, Perfect. Okay, try to go. I know sometimes you need to ask more complicated questions, but try to phrase them as simple as possible and always leave them open. Don't ask if they liked, ask what they feel or how they feel about or what they think about certain things. Okay, so even by asking how much did you like is already leading them to like give a more positive feedback than what they were originally planning to do. Okay, let's go to the answers. So again, very common mistake. This was Twitter's survey a few years back to add too many very complicated, very long answer options. Nobody is going to read all of them. Nobody. Okay, users don't read, not even on your UI. They are not reading the not even the error message. They just click OK and then they don't know what the hell just happened. Okay. Nobody will read it through. Everybody will read the first one, like which of the following best describes why I use Twitter. Also, like, why do I need to pick just one? I go to Twitter and do several of these, but I need to pick the best one. No, Twitter. What they will do is read the first one to read or to learn about breaking news in real time. Yes, that's what I do. That's something I do. So I click it and I go to the next question. Okay, so they are not going to like really deeply analyze this. Also, when you have more answers, because not all of the questions are yes, no, or like a very small scale. If you have more answers, very important that you always randomize your answers. Here you can see, even Google Form allows you to shuffle the option order. This way, you can at least, like not everybody will pick the first one, but it will be a little bit more random. Which I don't know how much it helps, because then you won't even know if everybody just clicked the first one, but at least, there will be another first one for them. Okay, and also, if you give options, like even if you, during your interviews, you heard 20 different options, there will be 10 or even better 7 that are the most common. Put those 7, or if those are the important answers for you. So, there must be some way to define which are the most important answers for you. Offer those as simple options and always put an other option. It's very, very important. Often people don't even understand why we need an other. For example, here, what is your primary reason for visiting this site today? Imagine your answer is not among the options listed here. If there is no other, and it's a mandatory question, which is because there's a star in front of it, what will you do? You will pick one that is not even true for you. So what did you do? You bias their data, and they will analyze and draw beautiful charts. And you were actually an honest survey respondent, not the one who just wants to win the voucher at the end. And not even you can fill it in a way that you don't bias their data. So it's very important. The other is the best option, because with other, you can even type in your answer. If you do other, I really recommend you to iterate on your survey. And after a while, read through the other options. So if it's, for example, a survey that, you leave out for a long time, or if you do time to time, always go through the other answers. And if there is also something that very often comes up, put it to the answer options. Okay. You might make a decision, though, that there's something, a really common answer you're not interested in. You can leave it in other, but always offer another option, okay? Even if they cannot type in, at least. So that's why I also like I prefer not to answer. So, for example, this is about education, which also might be considered as a question that, for example, someone who doesn't have it. I'm sure doctors are really proud of their educational degree, but maybe someone who has less than high school is not so proud. So how about you offer an option not to, if someone prefers not to answer? Very important. Every time you ask about money, you ask about income of people, you always put there an option like this. I prefer not to answer. That was a rule for me. I don't like to tell how much money I earn, not because it's such a crazy huge amount. It's just something I don't like to share. Every time I had a survey where it was a mandatory question and there was no I prefer not to say, I finished filling in the survey. That was my rule, and I think many people has that. Okay. And also, if sometimes none of the above is also a good option. For example, here, again, you will not learn about what other things they use their phone for. Maybe these are the 5 categories you are interested in, But if you let them choose another one, if their, their real answer is not among the listed one, at least they don't bias your data, okay? So these are the good ways to come across that, people will need to lie in your survey, although they never wanted to. Okay, a few words about NPS. I don't want to go too much into details. I could talk about for at least an hour why you shouldn't do NPS, but Erica Hall fortunately explains it very often. The biggest problem with NPS is that it's actually impossible to answer honestly because no human thinks about the probability of recommending something on a 10-point scale. It's not even 10, actually it's 11, right? Because it's from 0 to 10. Nobody, no human, like when was the last time when you were thinking about, like usually what we think is we like, we don't like. When you need to, rate something, for example, IMDb, I think they still have the 10-point scale. Very honestly, I couldn't tell you what's the difference between a 7 and an 8. On one day, I feel probably I would rate something a 7, that the other day I would rate a 9 or a 5, or, no, we are not used to these scales. Unless your education system in the schools, for example, as far as I know, in Romania, in Portuguese, they have a rating system in school that is a very big scale, like maybe a 0 to 10 scale. Those people might be able to think in a 10-point scale, but everybody else who went to school and we were judged and we were rated on a 5-point scale, I think that's the max you can actually think in you, okay? And in this 5-point scale, you can tell the difference between a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5, but in a 10-point scale, you cannot. Also, what she says here, I really love this. This is about NPS in general. It says that, would I recommend Ticketmaster to a friend? Hell no. I just paid $15 fee on top of the ticket price. But will I and my friends continue to give them money on regular? Yes, because they are a monopoly. So, oftentimes asking whether you were satisfied or not, what else can I do? Also in Hungary, we have, I think, 2 or 3 internet providers. In this house, we have only one. Vodafone can ask me as much as they can how satisfied I am. I have no other chance, So yeah, it makes no sense. But there are other problems with NPS besides of the huge scale that your brain is not actually able to think in. One of the biggest issues are that it's very, how we rate things, it's really cultural. In Britain, a 10-point is probably, in Germany, would be a maximum 6. Like a German would never give a 10 to anything unless it's totally, perfectly, spotless, which it's not existing. So I think in an NPS, a German would be giving maximum an 8. But a British person would never give worse than 5 or 6, okay? So it's very cultural how we rate certain things. And there are so many other problems with NPS, okay? But I know it's very commonly used. I think it's more often than not misused. Still, what you should know about NPS is, although it's crap, but it's actually researched, okay? So if you use NPS, don't change the scale. Here is something that Netflix did. This is kind of an NPS, right? The question is NPS because it asks me whether I would recommend Netflix to a family member or a friend or colleague. So this is the NPS question. Although in the next 3 months, I don't know what they had with these 3 months. Probably this is their, planning cycle. But what they did is they changed the 0 to 10 scale to 1 to 7. You might think, yeah, it's actually good, right? I just said nobody can think in the 0 to 10. I don't think the 1 to 7 is, okay, it's a bit better, but not so much better. Again, they are not giving textual value, to all of the numbers like they give to the ends. But again, what's the difference between 3 and a 4 and a 5? Very hard to tell. But if you do that, be prepared that you lost actually everything that the NPS actually gave you. You cannot calculate an NPS score, which is at least something that every company does, and you will not be able to say who are the promoters or detractors or how many you have. I hope, or I guess you know, but if you don't know, in the 1 to 10 scale of an NPS, let's go back here, it was an NPS survey. So the NPS, from an NPS, you can actually calculate your NPS score. And that's, you need to calculate the 9 and the 10s. Those are your promoters. Those are the people who would recommend your service to their friends and colleagues. And from 0 to 6, those are the detractors. Those are the people who are not satisfied with your product, and they are going to leave probably. 7 and the 8, they are the neutral. So the NPS score is calculating by counting the promoters and the detractors. And I guess you need to like divide, like, like you say, the number of promoters minus the number of detractors. That's your NPS score. Yeah, also good tip, if you are, every time I ask to give an NPS score, unless I really, really, really love or hate, hate fans and haters, unless I really hate or love the product, which in case I would give like a 9 or a 10 or something below 6, I always give a 7 and an 8. And this way I am left out from the calculation. So this way you can trick a little bit. This way you cannot answer an NPS, let's say. Okay, so yeah, if you change the scale, you won't be able to calculate these things any longer. So I'm wondering why you need to ask such a complicated question other than asking, and this is also something Erica tweeted, I couldn't find it now for this presentation, but once she tweeted like, if with the NPS, you actually want to understand if people are satisfied or dissatisfied with your product, why don't you ask just that? Are you satisfied with this product surface? I'm dissatisfied, I'm neutral, I'm satisfied. How much simpler is that? Why to ask a complicated thing to then calculate a very simple scale at the end? Makes no sense. Okay, a little more about scales. If you want to understand, because of course customer satisfaction is something you might want to measure and use a simple scale. I think the 5 scale is perfect. I know there are many people who says that the 6 is better because then they need to decide whether they are positive or negative. Why? Why do you force me to make a decision I didn't make before? I might be neutral about your service. I might not have any bad or neither good experiences. It's just okay. Why shouldn't I be able to give a neutral? So I'm all for the 5 scale. And that's really something our brain can think in if it was our school rating system as well. And actually, my favorite survey in the world is the toilet surveys. Have you seen that? I mean, it's amazing. The small, smileys and the emoticons also help you. It's contextual because you are just leaving the airport toilet and that's where you need to give feedback. So it's contextual, it's simple. They don't even need to ask the question because you know what the question is. We all understand each other. There's no, maybe, yeah, there would be one thing that could be improved. Yeah, if you give a bad rating, they will not know why it was a bad rating. So that would be an extra to, leave a little message nobody would do. So I'm just thinking, like really theoretically how it could be improved, but that's a perfect type of survey. Yeah, and one other thing about NPS, what I forgot to mention is that a lot of companies measure NPS. They will have a score at the end, and then the natural question comes up, what should we do to make the NPS better? And my bad news is that the NPS is not answering that. So also, why do you measure, why do you research something where you only get a number and you have no idea how to make that number better or worse? So it makes no sense. Okay, now we are closing to the end, also the end of my time. What you should not do. You should not use pie charts. That's something a lot of people are really curious when I tell them, or I recommend them not to use pie charts. Pie charts are the worst. I also put a link into the very end of this presentation that I recommend you to read. This is a pie chart, like ABC. You can stare at it for days. You will not be able to tell any trends because it's very hard to see what it actually represents. I'm telling you, or I'm showing you how the same thing looks with bars, as a comparison. On the bar charts, it's immediately like clear, which is the best one, which is the highest number, lowest number, the trends. In the pie charts, you see nothing. Okay, so if you are using charts and you are showing charts right at the end of a survey, because that's why you wanted quantitative information, or this is the best way to show quantitative information, always do bar charts. I know they are not so sexy. Yeah, donut charts are the same. Pies, donuts. If it's named after a food, forget it. Bars, okay, bars or line charts or like the graphs, the proper thing. These are the things to use. Okay, and again, do not talk about respondents. I just made up, something. Imagine, you see a satisfaction survey, and you see the results that 28% of people says they are very satisfied. You're like, yay, we did it. Very few people are dissatisfied, just 14%. What you see in front of your eyes is everybody, all of our users, half of our users are very satisfied with our survey. Now, if I only do one change, and instead of the percentage, I put here the numbers, it already feels less trustworthy, right? Come on, only 2 people are dissatisfied, 12 satisfied. So, like, when you see something like that, you say, maybe we should run another research, okay? So if you put their numbers, even if those are low numbers, that's fine. But don't do the percentage magic. Usually people love to do percentages when they had very few respondents, which is actually hiding the fact that your research is not trustworthy. If you have a survey and you got very few answers, take it as qualitative information. Okay, like do the same what you would do with interviews. Try to find insights, things that are worded in a way that helps you to move forward, and don't look at it as quantitative information. Okay, so these were my do's and don'ts. And what I forgot to add is, right, if you do a survey, always put an option at the end. It's an optional question, very important, because your surveys are anonymous. Always put there an optional question, ask them, do you agree, or can we contact you if we had more questions, or if we would like to have an interview with you. Always offer these people so that they leave their email address, and then you can actually contact them and ask if they have if you have further questions. You can clarify, you can do all of those things that usually you can. So here I put here a few links. I have 2 excellent articles from Erica Hall that she wrote about surveys. I really recommend to read any of these, and also buy and read her books. She wrote excellent books on research. I put here the Niels and Norman's group, Should You Run a Survey, where they really nicely also explain what are the good usage cases, or where you should do a survey. I really love Alberto Cairo. All of his books are excellent. He wrote a book specifically on how charts lie. So my examples were also from his books. He shows a lot of really good examples from, for example, American politics and the world around, where they're really lying you with charts and want you to see certain numbers in a way which, in fact, if it's visualized properly, it looks totally different. And then I also put here the article from the Business Insider about why the pie chart is the worst chart in the world. It explains it in real detail. And also, if you love books on psychology, then I recommend Dan Ariely's books. He wrote many on behavioral economics that I really love, and that tells you a lot of things about how our brain works. And I also wrote an article actually many years ago on, it's in Hungarian, unfortunately. So if you speak Hungarian, then I recommend you to look for it. It's on, like what you shouldn't do and what you should do when you are building surveys. And also my final recommendation is that fill in as many surveys as you can. If you come across one, fill it out, and you will learn a lot from your experience, like how when your answer option is not among those, and you start to think differently then about this method. So now let's go to questions.
Okay, so thank you so much for your presentation, Zsuzsa. It was great. And we will start a Q&A session just in a few moments. So if anyone has some last-minute questions before we start the Q&A session, please feel free to ask away. We will be monitoring the chat even throughout the Q&A session. So if any questions come up as we are answering those already in, we will get to them at the very end. So let's start with the first question. What about audio responses instead of typed responses? Would this be a middle ground between a survey and an interview?
That's actually a very good idea. I really like that. It will be something in between an interview and a survey, right? Yeah, definitely it would overcome some of the problems that surveys have. On the other hand, analyzing it would be a real pain. Like, I don't know if you ever had to analyze, I don't know, 20 to 40 interviews and, type, like go through the notes, or like the word to word transcribes, and try to find patterns. Imagine doing that with, I don't know, 200 respondents who sent you 5 audio responses. So yeah, I mean, probably it would be better, but I'm not sure. It would be a good experience to analyze it. Already open-ended questions actually are really, really painful to analyze if you have more than 50 responses. So
Yeah, I think the added value would be in making it asynchronous, basically, because with the interview you must be available for the participant to chat to them, but this way they can provide you with the answers in like a voice message, basically, or a voicemail,
sure.
and then you can get to them when you have time for that. And I think that with the advantage of sentiment analysis from the transcript, it can speed up the analysis process,
Right.
but it's still a load, isn't it?
Yeah, AI will help us in analysis. I hope really soon, because I would love getting some help in that.
Okay, so moving on to another question. Surveys seem as a good way to introduce UX democratization into your team. What are your thoughts on that?
This is where the dangerous part comes in. Right, UX democratization means that not only UX researchers do research, but everybody else in the team. My experience is that even like trained researchers, experienced researchers can do really big mistakes in surveys. Imagine someone who never even thought about that. So this is exactly the case that Erica Hall also advocates against, when those people are building surveys who are not really, this is the attractive nuisance. It's really lacking. Even, like, don't misunderstand me, even a PM can put together a survey, right? But like, if you want to introduce that, I really ask you to always get those surveys reviewed by the researchers. So if sure, it can work that the PM is putting together a survey, and then somebody who has the knowledge and the experience goes through and points out the problems and improves that. But don't let people without proper knowledge just sending out surveys, because it will be exactly, and yeah, PMs are more likely to, that's my experience. I also used to be a PM, so I can talk about PMs. PMs are more likely to, they want to see their ideas approved and their hypotheses approved. My experience is they are less open to, when the signs are telling them it's not a good idea. So I think it can be very dangerous.
Maybe involving your teammates after the initial round of interviews to, let's say, review the general points together, and then maybe invite them to partake in the setup of the follow-up survey, which you mentioned, to to check the results that you get from the interviews using the quantitative data. Maybe that's an option to introduce the democratization with the surveys as well, like in a controlled environment based on the results that you already got from the interviews.
I actually don't like the UX democratization as a term, because it means, or it suggests, that the UX research is done in a totally enclosed way and other people are not involved. I believe in UX research where people are involved. PMs and designers are sitting on the UX sessions. They might even ask questions. They see users, they hear users. And so, if we talk about that, then there's no need for democratization, right? Because they are actually part of the research process.
Yeah, so it's a way to even communicate through the company if you are doing the UX research with the involvement of PMs, etc., and the review meetings and more. They are basically always up to date with your findings, and I think that's a good way. Okay. Any more insights on this, or can we move forward?
We can move forward, I think. I hope I managed to answer parts of it.
Okay. How do you think incentives influence survey respondents versus interview participants? Do you think there is a different pattern there?
As I said, there is. It works differently, right? Everybody who you invite to interview, they're going to get an incentive. there's no like, no, I didn't like your answers, or we will do a, I don't know, like a winner at the end. No, every interview participant gets incentivized. I only believe in money as an incentive. It can be a voucher, but like a voucher is actually a tax-friendly way of giving money to your participants. Money is a good incentive because like our world is based on money. Everybody needs money. Of course, it can still bias. Like if you offer too little money, then probably you won't find the right people. What's more, I actually did this mistake once. I offered too little money for a researcher. I was looking for data analysts, and guess what? No data analysts sign up. Only people who claimed or actually lied they are data analysts, and they were not. Okay, so you can bias. You will actually, and again, if you don't offer enough money, then you will not get to the real professionals of a certain domain. For example, when we did research at Prezi, and we started to build Prezi for the business people, like for like instead of the hobby presenters or conference presenters, to people who use presentations in their during their work. Salespeople were one of our main personas, and salespeople were really expensive to get for an interview. Why? Because salespeople, like, they either spend an hour with you talking to you, or they do cold calls, or they send out emails, or try to like get leads, and this way they increase their bonus at the end of the month. So we actually had to increase our incentive a lot to get to the good salespeople. So sure, incentives somehow has an effect on who are you talking to. That's why it's important to do a good screener survey, so you find your real participant. But you are not screening your survey respondents, right? So you don't know, and that's my biggest problem with surveys, that each line looks the same. Even those lines who is someone who really read through your questions and thought about the answers, and someone else who just clicked a random thing because they wanted to get the voucher that you are going to raffle at the end. Those two lines will look the same, but in an interview, you can tell who is a liar and who is someone who is telling the truth. So, yeah, I think incentives work here differently, but the problem is that I think if you want to incentivize respondents, then you should always use money and not anything, like nothing else, because when you go for an iPad, like those people will come in who would really love to have an iPad, and that might not be your target audience. So be careful. Of course, if you want to have many responses, you can also offer a voucher, but it's usually a raffle-like thing. So yeah, it is different, and that's why it's different how it works.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that sometimes there can be a problem with the niche targeting, that there will be participants who will basically pretend that they are on target, even though they are not. Do you have any tips on detecting these participants during the screening surveys?
Yeah, I mean, a good screening survey would never reveal what type of people you are looking for. And sometimes, the screening surveys can do that, but when you go and do a Facebook advertisement, often you need to put there some leads that will help them to fake the answers. So yeah, a good screening survey though has open questions. So that's why I also love open questions there. So when in a screening survey you ask them like, what kind of tools do you use during your work, and you give the options, it's really easy to lie because you say this and this. But when you put there an open, there's just an input box, then they at least need to do a Google search to put there some meaningful things. So yeah, the more open questions in a screening survey usually helps. But again, then you will have less people fill it out, and then you have less interview participants. So it's a hard topic.
Yeah. So following up on the incentives, do you have any tips on reducing bias introduced with monetary incentive?
No, actually, I don't. But I think the monetary incentive is one of the best ones. I think all the other incentives are usually the ones that bias more your audience. The monetary is, if you know the right amount, like if it's not too much and not too few, then, and yeah, unfortunately, that it actually changes from region to region. So a good amount of, or a good value incentive in the US will be like a huge money in, for example, Asia. So if you put it to the right group or in front of the wrong folks, and, maybe no one will sign up in the US and everybody will sign up in Asia. So you need to be careful about these differences. So with the monetary, it's also very tricky. But I have no tips on reducing bias on that. But I think money is the least biasing incentive.
And it's because of its flexibility, correct? So because it's like a universal incentive.
Exactly. So everybody needs it. That's why. So not everybody needs an iPad, but everybody needs money, because if I go to the store, that's what I need to give them to give me bread and milk. What I need. So money is like everybody needs it, and that's why I think it's the least biasing thing.
Okay, so moving on, have you used AI to help you with analyzing your surveys?
No, unfortunately not. I think, the whole AI thing started when I already was a freelancer. If you work at a big or bigger company, or even if at a small company, you have a different budget you work on. First of all, I don't do many surveys because I don't believe in them. Second, if I must, then, I don't have the budget usually to pay for these AI tools, although I would love to have them because it can be really, really painful. And maybe AI would help us also to overcome some of the biases that we have. So I'm looking forward to AI helping us analyze, find patterns, look for quotes and all of that. I think that would be a great usage of any AI technology.
You mentioned that the analysis can be painful sometimes. I can relate to that. And what do you think is the biggest pain point that the introduction of AI into the analysis could help you solve or mitigate?
Yeah, I think, when you, so now we are talking about surveys. I think the most painful is actually the open-ended questions, to analyze that, because you have no other way just to go through one by one and try to tag it somehow. So I think that's something AI could do, and it wouldn't be, because it's very, very painful. So
yeah, because of the many ways, the many variants of how people can basically tell the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So exactly. So they can say the same things in so many different words, and also it's just one thing that they say the same thing with different words, but oftentimes they combine several things. So one open-ended answer can be 3 or 4. Answers that you take them apart because somebody says these 4 things, but somebody only says 2 of those, or just one and something else. So it's that's why it's really painful to analyze these open-ended answers. And again, that's something I didn't even mention, that the better the survey, the more painful the analysis is, because those open-ended questions, oh my God, so my nightmares.
Okay, and in the meantime, we had one last question coming in from the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give any advice on educating stakeholders about these risks? I find it very difficult when they are so used to trusting the big numbers in surveys and cast scores over qualitative research. That's a really good point. And actually, I can't find it now, but I will try to look. So maybe it's not even valid any longer. So Erica Hall, who I mentioned several times, she has an agency in the US, in San Francisco, and it's called, I wanted to say Mule Design. Yeah, Mule Design is the name of the agency. And a few years back, they actually published a small booklet. It was like this size. I even have it somewhere, but I couldn't find it now. So these small booklets that you could order by 3. And their tip was, it was actually all about why surveys are bad and why you shouldn't trust them and what is wrong with them. But it was just a 10-page small thing, like a very thin leaflet. And her recommendation was, and that's why you got it by 3, that you should just forget one of those on the desk of your boss. So maybe, he comes across once drinking coffee and just reads it through. That was actually the best idea that I ever come across. I still never left any of those on the stakeholder desk. I still have all 3 because I find it too valuable to waste it. Although, this
it's hard.
This can be like a good way to work around the typical pushback of which you get from people when you try to convince them about something that they
Yeah.
didn't believe before. So if you let them discover it on their own,
Exactly.
it will be much easier to convince them because they will believe that it's their idea from the beginning.
And then they come to you and say, did you know? And that's the best way, if they, Erica, who actually does this, like I just recently seen, she reposted one of these articles that I linked on surveys in LinkedIn, and a stakeholder came to me and he said, like, did you read this article from Erica, who it's like 15 years old article, excellent, still very on point. And he said, like, it says surveys are not a good method, and it really seemed that he discovered it on LinkedIn, and now he internalized that, and he thought that, like, maybe he's sharing with me something I didn't know. So, yeah, this is usually, I think, articles, like, I know sending them an article it doesn't always work the same, but maybe just share it here and there, maybe share it on LinkedIn or somewhere. But I must say it can be very, very tricky. Like, yeah, if someone is really convinced, and my experience, and I have to say that it's in the US, it's definitely true. So American stakeholders, but also in Europe. So those stakeholders for whom research was defined in the 80s or in the 90s, where research meant focus groups and surveys. This was, all the research that every company did. It's really hard to change their opinion. Yeah, focus groups is another topic. I could talk for an hour why you shouldn't do focus groups. So those people who actually educated themselves around research in that era, they will be really hard to move out and to convince that interviews make more sense or a diary study makes more sense. So it's a really hard thing, but never give up. One day, maybe they will find a booklet on their desk and and come to you and share with you what they just learned.
Okay, so it looks like there are no more questions. So I think we can slowly wrap it up. It's been a great pleasure having you with us today, Zsuzsa. So many great insights. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed being here tonight.
And if you have like one last point that the people who are still here should take away from the stream, what would that be?
Don't do surveys, do interviews instead. Interviews are so much better, believe me. You can talk to real life people. They will share their pains, their gains, their successes, and you can attach a face to it. You can learn so much more. And just a recent experience, because although I don't believe in surveys, I just did a huge research last year. We did a lot of deep interviews, and then we kind of convinced ourselves that we need to validate these findings through a survey. I must say we haven't learned anything. Nothing was added by the survey to the deep interviews that I did in the beginning. So sure, we can say, yeah, we validated, but I wish we spent that time to do something else, because it was a huge, so yeah, it's not even like, it's easy to set up a survey, but to properly analyze a survey, it's really painful. And you can spend that time so much better with doing like good research.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks everyone who joined us today, and have a nice rest of the day.